The courtyard smells like wet stone and morning jasmine, and I am trying very hard not to vomit in front of 40 people. My name is Saren Voss. I am 20 years old, a scholarship student at Ashford Elite Academy, and I am currently 6 months pregnant in a world that has decided this is the funniest, most pathetic thing it has ever witnessed. I press my back against the courtyard wall and focus on the fountain at the center of the quad. Cold stone, the sound of water. The trick my body has learned for suppressing nausea in public: find something still and keep your eyes on it. Don't move too fast. Don't let your sense spike. Don't give them anything to work with. It doesn't always work. There he is. Isolde Reese's voice carries the particular quality of someone who has never once in her life needed to raise it. She doesn't shout. She doesn't need to. The acoustics of money and social position do all the amplifying for her. She moves through the courtyard with 3 of her closest followers at her back, all beta girls with sharp clothes and sharper eyes, and she stops about 4 feet away from me like I'm something interesting she found on the side of the road. You look tired, Voss. I keep my eyes on the fountain. Even more tired than yesterday. She tilts her head. Is that possible? To look progressively worse every single morning? Is that a medical condition or just a personal failing? Soft laughter from the girls behind her. Practiced laughter. The kind that says, we find this funny because she finds it funny, and we understand our role here. My hand moves to my stomach. I catch myself and stop. That's what they're waiting for. That gesture. The moment I touch my belly, they have permission to talk about it openly. Like acknowledging it myself makes it communal property. Don't you have a seminar? I say. My voice comes out quieter than I want it to. Cancelled. Isolde examines her nails. Which means I have the entire morning to appreciate the Academy's most fascinating ongoing situation. She looks at me directly. Not at my face. Lower. How far along are we now? We. As if she's part of this. Leave me alone, Isolde. I'm just curious. She takes a step closer. Her beta scent is aggressively floral, something expensive that seems designed to overwhelm other people's olfactory space. 6 months, isn't it? And still no name, no claim, no alpha anywhere in sight. She smiles. It doesn't reach anything behind her eyes. I've been trying to piece it together, honestly. Who would it be? Someone paid, maybe. Or a charity case, some old unmated alpha who felt sorry for you. Stop. The mystery is what makes it interesting. If you just told us who it was, we could all move on. She pauses. Unless you genuinely don't know. The laughter that follows is louder than before. I know, I think. I just can't say it out loud. Not because I'm ashamed of that night, but because what I remember of it sounds insane. 3 scents, 3 voices, a warmth that felt like belonging to something, to someone, for the first time in my life. And then the cold, empty space of a hotel room at sunrise, and nothing else. 3 alphas whose faces I never fully saw. 3 scents I still carry in my chest like pressed flowers between the pages of a book I'm not allowed to open. The Calloway triplets. I've never said it out loud, not even to myself in a room with the door locked. Because saying it out loud means believing it. And believing it means confronting the fact that the most powerful, most feared alumni this academy has ever produced took one look at me after the winter formal and apparently decided morning was a good time to disappear. I'm not doing this to protect them. I'm doing this because nobody would believe me. I barely believe me. Isolde is still talking. The scholarship committee meets next month, by the way. You know they review student standing twice a year. I'm on the advisory panel. Another smile. Slower this time. I just thought you should be aware. There it is. The real thing underneath the social cruelty, the structural threat. Isolde's family funds 30% of Ashford's operating budget. She doesn't bully people because she enjoys it, though she clearly does. She bullies people because she can, because the Academy's machinery runs on her family's money, and removing an inconvenient scholarship student requires only the mildest nudge from the right hand. My throat tightens, not from the nausea, from something older and more exhausting than nausea. Have a beautiful morning, Voss. She turns. Her followers turn with her like a single organism. Try not to faint again. It's really becoming a thing. They leave. I slide down the courtyard wall until I'm sitting on the cold stone ground. I don't care who sees. My legs have been giving me trouble since last week. The doctor said it was normal. Blood pressure adjustment. Nothing alarming as long as I rest, but the word alarming lives in my head anyway, lodged there like a splinter. I press my palm flat against my stomach. Immediately, a flutter. Soft, rhythmic, 3 distinct beats in quick succession that the midwife told me was completely normal for multiples, that movement patterns often overlap, that I shouldn't read into it. I read into it every time. 3 beats. Almost like 3 separate acknowledgments, like 3 separate small things, saying, I hear you, I'm here. I know, I whisper to them, low enough that no one passing can hear. I know, I'm okay. I'm not entirely okay, but I'm here. That counts. I've been a scholarship student at Ashford since I was 16. 4 years of being the person in the room who earned his place differently from everyone else, not through family legacy, not through a parent's donor check, but through 3 years of academic competition that I nearly destroyed my health to win. Ashford Elite Academy is one of those institutions that everyone in the country recognizes by name. Old money, old stone, old rules. Alphas from the founding families walk its halls like they were born inside the walls, which some of them practically were. The Calloways, the Rises, the Mercer Holt family, the Blackwoods, lineages that have sent sons and daughters here for generations. And then there are people like me, people whose parents didn't attend, people for whom the scholarship isn't a badge of honor so much as a lifeline, the difference between a future and the absence of one. I've never fit seamlessly. I was fine with that. You learn a certain kind of armor in those circumstances, not the armor of aggression or defensive snobbery, but the armor of invisibility. Keep your grades impeccable. Keep your head down. Don't give anyone a reason to look too hard at the seams. Then the winter formal happened. Then my suppressants failed. Then everything fell apart in the most spectacular and quiet way possible, because I am the kind of person whose catastrophes happen silently, out of sight, in hotel bathrooms and scholarship offices and infirmary waiting rooms. The winter formal was 6 months ago. I had attended because the scholarship committee strongly encouraged all scholarship students to participate in academy social events, visibility, community integration, the language of institutional expectation dressed up as choice. I had worn the only formal thing I owned, a dark green jacket that was slightly too large in the shoulders, and I had stood near the edges of the event all night like a piece of furniture that had wandered in from the wrong room. I don't know exactly when my suppressants started failing. I know it was gradual, and then all at once, the way these things always are. I know that by 9 in the evening I was overheating, and by 10 I understood what was happening, and by 11 I was moving toward the exit with every intention of calling a suppressant emergency line. I made it as far as the hallway before the heat fully took me. What happened after that exists in fragments. Not because I was unconscious, I was present, I was there, but because heat haze does something strange to memory, smoothing out the details and leaving only texture and sensation. Cedar, rain, something metallic and electric, like the air before a storm. 3 separate scents, distinct but threaded together, like 3 instruments playing in the same key. Warmth that felt intentional. Hands that were careful. Voices low and close, speaking to each other and occasionally to me, one measured, one urgent, one soft. I remember being walked to a room. I remember the specific feeling of being held and not afraid, which was strange because I am almost always afraid of alphas in close proximity. I remember the morning light through hotel curtains. I remember the empty room. I remember sitting on the edge of an unfamiliar bed for a very long time, trying to decide if what I felt was relief or grief. I still haven't decided. 6 weeks later, the pregnancy test. I sat on the bathroom floor of my tiny off-campus room for 40 minutes with the positive test in my hand, thinking about the scholarship committee, thinking about the midwife I couldn't afford, thinking about the 3 cents I still carried in my chest, thinking about my mother who worked 2 jobs and had never once made me feel like a burden, even though I knew I sometimes was. Then I got up off the floor. I have been getting up off floors ever since. The infirmary at Ashford is on the east wing of the main building. past the library, and down a corridor that always smells faintly of antiseptic and old paper. I go there more than I'd like. The midwife the academy arranged reluctantly, under pressure from the scholarship coordinator, a good woman named Dr. Felicity Marsh, who has been quietly furious on my behalf since the pregnancy became visible visits twice a week. Today she has news. All three are healthy, she says, adjusting the portable monitor. Heartbeats strong, growth tracking normally. Your blood pressure is still slightly elevated, which is why I want you sitting down more often, Saren. I mean it. No more standing through full lectures. I stand because sitting in the back makes me feel like I'm hiding. You can feel like you're hiding while sitting down. The physical result is the same. I almost smile. She almost smiles back. The triplet pregnancy is progressing remarkably well given your baseline constitution, she continues, making notes. I'd expect in a standard case. Don't say standard. In a typical case for this gestational stage, we'd see more complications. You're either very lucky or very stubborn. Both, I say. Definitely both. She closes her folder and looks at me properly. The professional distance she maintains most of the time slips slightly. She's done this twice before, always when she's about to say something she's not sure I want to hear. Have you given any more thought to contacting the fathers? My hand's still on my lap. No. Saren. The triplet pregnancy is rare, I say. I know what it implies biologically. One per bonded alpha, a pack bond formation. I know the theory. I look at her steadily. But I don't have names. I have fragments of memory and 3 cents I've never been able to identify definitively. I can't walk up to someone and say, I think you might have bonded with me 6 months ago, please confirm or deny. If a pack bond was formed, the alphas in question would know. Then they know and they haven't looked. The sentence sits between us. She doesn't argue with it. There's nothing to argue. It's the simplest possible explanation and the most painful one. There are services, she says carefully. Biological tracing, bond signal matching, if you gave permission. Not yet. My voice is steadier than I feel. Let me get through graduation first. Let me get my degree. After that, I'll think about what comes next. She nods slowly. She doesn't agree, but she respects it. That's something. I'll see you Thursday, she says. And Saren sit down and lectures. I have a ritual that I've developed over the past 6 months for the worst moments. When the humiliation gets too heavy and the loneliness gets too specific and the nausea is doing something particularly vindictive, I find the quietest corner I can. I sit down and I put both hands on my stomach, not as a gesture of defeat, as a reminder. There are 3 of them in there. 3 small lives that had no say in any of this, not in the circumstances of their conception, not in the chaos that followed, not in the cold, empty mornings, or the scholarship committee meetings, or the Isolde Rices of the world. They are just here, small and present and completely trusting. That trust is the most terrifying thing I have ever been given. It is also the only thing that has kept me on my feet. I find my corner on a Thursday evening, the library closing around me, the last of the amber light slanting through the tall windows. I sit in the chair farthest from the door and I put my hands on my stomach and I breathe. 1, 2, 3. 3 small flutters in reply, almost synchronized, almost like they're talking to each other in there. I know you don't understand what's happening yet, I tell them, barely above a breath. And I'm glad you don't. I'll protect you from understanding it for as long as I can. A pause. But I need you to know something. Whatever this world says about how you got here, whatever words they use, whatever looks they give you, you are not a consequence. You are not an accident. You are not a mistake that I am managing. The flutters come again. Insistent. Warm. You are the only thing I've done right in 6 months, I whisper, and I would walk through everything again to have you. A beat. Now stop kicking my ribs. I know you heard me. A very specific flutter against my left side, which I choose to interpret as sorry, we'll try. I close my eyes. For just a moment, in the empty library, with the amber light going gold, I let myself be something other than exhausted. Across the city, in the 42nd floor office of Calloway Group Consolidated, 3 men sit in a meeting that stopped being productive 20 minutes ago. Arch Calloway is reading the same paragraph of a contract for the 5th time. He knows it's the fifth time because he marked the page the first time and noticed himself returning to it 4 times since. This is not something that happens to him. He is not a man who loses focus. He has built an empire alongside his brothers on the foundation of precise, relentless attention, and the fact that his mind has been drifting for 6 months with no identifiable cause is something he has documented in a private journal he keeps locked because he doesn't want his brothers to know how extensively he's been tracking it. The pull started the morning after the Ashford winter formal. Faint at first, a directional sensation, like knowing which way is north without looking at a compass. Then gradually heavier, more insistent. In the past 2 weeks, it has become something he would describe as urgent if he were willing to admit that anything makes him feel urgency. He turns the page of the contract without reading it. Across the table, Matthew Calloway is not pretending to read anything. He is sitting with his chair pushed back from the table and his arms crossed over his chest, looking at the far wall with the expression he gets when he is trying not to break something. His leg is bouncing under the table, a habit he has when the restlessness reaches a level he can't metabolize through work or training. Matthew went back, the morning after the formal, before dawn, while Arch and Sigmund were still asleep in their separate rooms. He had gone back to the room where they'd left their Omega to sleep, this quiet, gentle-scented Omega they'd found in the hallway in crisis. This person whose scent had detonated something in all 3 of them simultaneously in a way that had never happened before in 31 years of life, and the bed was empty, and the room was cold, and there was no note. He has been angry about it for 6 months. The anger has nowhere useful to go, which makes it worse. At the other end of the table, Sigmund Calloway is watching his brothers and pretending he isn't. Sigmund is the one who notices things. It is both his greatest asset and his most exhausting quality. He noticed that Arch started keeping a private journal in month 2. He noticed that Matthew's aggression threshold dropped significantly in month 3. He has been noticing his own symptoms, too, the insomnia, the low-grade persistent anxiety, the way certain scents in the city occasionally make him stop dead in a crowd, searching for something he can't name. He knows what it is. He's known for months. The pack bond formed that night, all 3 of them, simultaneously, with the same Omega. He's read enough about rare bonding events to recognize the symptoms. He's just been trying to figure out how to say it to his brothers without one of them, Matthew, specifically immediately attempting to dismantle the city to find the person in question. He's also been trying to figure out why the bond signal has been growing heavier rather than fading. Pack bonds weaken with distance and time if the Omega is unbonded. They don't intensify. They shouldn't intensify. Unless... Sigmund sets down his pen. Arch, he says. Arch looks up from the contract he hasn't been reading. The endowment ceremony at Ashford. Sigmund's voice is careful. Measured. We confirmed it for next week. Yes. We should go. Arch is quiet for a moment. He knows Sigmund can see him, knowing the slight tightening around his eyes that means he's received information he hasn't yet processed into words. We were planning to send a representative. We should go personally. Sigmund holds his brother's gaze. I think there's something at Ashford that we need to find. Matthew's chair stops moving. Sigmund doesn't look at him. He keeps his eyes on Arch. Arch closes the contract, sets it aside. Clear next Thursday, he says to the room, which is empty, except for the 3 of them. Already done, Sigmund says. Across the table, Matthew uncrosses his arms. I don't know why I feel it. I have no rational explanation for the way Thursday evening in the library goes warm at the edges, the way the pull in my chest, which I have been living with for 6 months, this directional ache that I've never been able to explain to the midwife or myself, shifts from background noise to something louder, something closer. I look up from my hands. The library is empty. The amber light is gone, replaced by the cool blue of evening. Nothing has changed. And yet, stop it, I tell the feeling. Stop. Nothing is coming. Nothing has changed. A flutter from inside me, 3 beats, quick and insistent. Don't encourage it. I close my eyes and breathe until the feeling quiets to something manageable. I don't know that 7 days from now, on a Thursday evening exactly like this one, a black car will pull up to Ashford's east gate. I don't know that three men will step out of it and walk through the academy's stone archway, and that within 30 seconds of crossing the threshold, all three of them will stop at the same moment. I don't know any of it. I just feel, in the quiet of the library with my hands on my stomach, that something is about to change. That the world I've been surviving is about to become something else. I don't know if I'm afraid of that or hungry for it. Probably both. The news travels through Ashford the way all significant news does, not through official announcement, but through whisper networks that move faster than any administration memo. I hear it first from Petra, my only genuine friend at the academy, a beta girl who studies environmental architecture and has been quietly, stubbornly loyal to me since month 2 when she sat next to me in the infirmary waiting room and said, "I heard what Isolde said to you in the courtyard. That was wrong. Do you want half my sandwich?" I said yes, and we've been friends since. She finds me at my locker on Monday morning, slightly out of breath, eyes wide. "The Calloways are coming," she says. My hands freeze on the combination lock. What? The endowment ceremony. This Thursday. The whole board has been told they're attending personally, not sending a representative. All three of them. She leans closer. "Saren, the whole staff is in a state. The headmaster's been in meetings all morning. They're ordering new furniture for the reception hall." "New furniture," I repeat. "For the Calloways." She says the name the way everyone says it, with a specific weight. Not reverence exactly. Something closer to the way you'd describe a weather system. Not good or bad, just large. "I thought you should know, before the whole academy loses its mind about it." I should thank her. I should say something normal. Instead, I stand at my locker with the combination half-dialed and a sound in my chest that isn't quite a heartbeat and isn't quite a panic attack, but exists somewhere between the two. "Thursday. Are you okay?" Petra's voice sharpens with concern. "Saren, you've gone very pale." "I'm fine." I finish dialing. The locker opens. "Thank you for telling me." She watches me pull out my books. She has the quality of someone who knows when not to push, one of the reasons I've been able to stay friends with her across 6 months of circumstances that would have strained most friendships. "Do you want me to come with you to the ceremony?" she asks. "Scholarship students aren't required to attend." "I know. Do you want me to come?" I look at her. She looks back. Steady, patient, completely unbothered by the fact that my hands are trembling slightly on my textbook. "Yes," I say. "Please." I spend Monday through Wednesday trying to get my attendance excused. The first attempt, Dr. Marsh, the scholarship coordinator, who hears me out with her characteristic combination of attentiveness and practiced composure, then shakes her head slowly. "I can't excuse you from this one, Saren. The endowment ceremony is all student, the board specifically, and I cannot stress specifically enough specified full attendance. My medical situation. I know your medical situation. I've been managing the paperwork around your medical situation for 5 months. If you weren't carrying 3 children and at elevated blood pressure risk, I'd still need full attendance from the scholarship cohort." She looks at me carefully. "Is there a reason you specifically don't want to attend?" "I just think it would be better for me to rest." She knows I'm lying. I can see her knowing it. She's too professional and too kind to say so. "The midwife will be on site for the duration of the ceremony," she says. "I've already arranged it. You'll be comfortable, and if anything feels wrong, you have an immediate out." She pauses. "Saren, it's 2 hours. You've survived considerably harder things than 2 hours in a reception hall." "I have. I know I have. That's not the problem. The problem is that 2 hours in a reception hall with the Calloway triplets in it is not the same as 2 hours in a reception hall. It is 2 hours in an enclosed space with 3 men whose bond I may be carrying in my chest, whose children I am carrying in my body, who may or may not know I exist, who may or may not choose to acknowledge me if they do. It is 2 hours of not knowing which version of this story is true. I leave Dr. Marsh's office with my attendance confirmed. Wednesday night, I do not sleep. I lie in the narrow bed of my off-campus room and stare at the ceiling and think about all the ways Thursday can go. Scenario 1. The Calloways arrive, attend the ceremony, leave. They are surrounded by important people and academy staff and have no reason to single out one pregnant scholarship student. Nothing happens. The ceremony concludes. My life continues exactly as it was. Scenario 2. They see me. They recognize the bond. They are horrified, an unmated omega with a visible pregnancy, carrying their children, a scandal of unimaginable proportion for families with their public profile. They pay me to be quiet, or they threaten me, or they simply pretend not to know. Scenario 3. They see me and they are glad. I press my face into my pillow. Scenario 3 is the one I can't think about without something in my chest doing something I can't name. Something that has no practical application and no protective value and should absolutely not be allowed to exist in a person in my circumstances. I have spent 6 months being practical. I have made practical decisions about the pregnancy, about the scholarship, about my future, about what I am willing to tell and what I am not. I have been so rigorously practical that Petra once told me it was slightly alarming how calm I was about all of this, and I told her that calm was the only resource I had in unlimited supply. And she said that was both impressive and sad, and I told her she was correct on both counts. Scenario 3 is not practical. Scenario 3 is the thing that lives underneath all the practicality like something alive and inconvenient, and I have been managing it for 6 months through the simple method of not looking directly at it. On Thursday morning, I am going to have to look directly at it. I turn onto my side and put my hand on my stomach. 3 flutters, immediate, almost impatient. I know, I tell them. I'm not sleeping either. The reception hall at Ashford is the oldest and most imposing room in the building. Vaulted ceilings, dark wood paneling, windows that are 2 stories tall and face west, so that afternoon light comes through them gold and horizontal. It was built for exactly this kind of event. The gathering of important people in an impressive space, the performance of institutional significance. It is full by 4 in the afternoon. Every student, every faculty member, every administrator, all in their best, all arranged in careful order. The kind of arrangement that says, we know where we stand relative to each other and we are performing it consciously. The scholarship cohort is near the back, which Petra points out is at least historically consistent, if not particularly inspiring. You're gripping my arm, Petra says, very gently. Sorry, I loosen my hand. I'm fine. You've said that 6 times since we got here. I'm fine the 6th time. She doesn't argue. She simply shifts her arm so that her hand is now covering mine, which means I can grip without cutting off her circulation. This is why she's my friend. The hall is loud with the particular noise of 200 people managing their nervousness through conversation. Discussions about the endowment, how much, for which departments, whether the new laboratory wing will finally be approved. Discussions about the Calloways, their company, their reputation, the fact that they graduated early and built something formidable and have never publicly set foot in Ashford since. I heard they're buying the old sports annex, someone near us says. I heard they're donating a whole building, someone else replies. I heard they only came back because Arch Calloway has unfinished business, a third voice says, and something in my chest tightens so severely that Petra's hand presses down on mine in response. Hey, she says, very quietly. Hey, look at me. I look at her. Whatever happens, she says, I'm right here. Okay? I nod. The doors at the far end of the hall open. The sound doesn't stop, exactly. It doesn't make a dramatic transition from loud to silent. It tapers, the way a fire does when you pull the air from it, one conversation ending, then another, until what's left is the hush of 200 people responding to something that their bodies have recognized before their minds have named it. Arch Calloway comes through the door first. He's exactly as I remember, in the most fragment-like way tall, dark-coated, with a stillness that suggests the room should arrange itself around him rather than the other way around. His face is controlled to a degree that looks like effort, which is somehow more frightening than ease. His eyes are gray and they move across the room with the systematic efficiency of someone who is looking for something specific. Matthew comes in behind him, and to the left. He is bigger than I remember, not taller, but broader. The physical size of him carrying a weight that the formal suit he's wearing makes no attempt to diminish. His jaw is tight. His eyes move faster than Arch's, less systematic, more urgent, the way someone's eyes move when they've been searching for a long time and learn to scan quickly. Sigmund comes last, and he is the one who makes me feel the cold sweat start at the back of my neck, because Sigmund comes in already looking soft. Not weak, nothing about him is weak, but somehow less armored than the other two, like he came in having already made a decision about what he was going to feel. They walk 3 steps into the hall, and then they stop. All three of them, at exactly the same moment. It's not dramatic in the way a movie would make it dramatic. There's no gasp, no sound, nothing that indicates to the room that something has just happened. They simply stop walking, Arch first, then Matthew a fraction of a second later, then Sigmund, as if they've walked into something invisible. Arch's hand, at his side, closes into a fist. Matthew's head comes up sharply. Sigmund inhales. I feel it in my chest before I understand what I'm feeling, a warmth that starts at my sternum and moves outward, the same warmth I've been carrying for 6 months, but magnified, directional, specific. Like something that had been pulling from a distance suddenly finding its source. The bond, I think, the bond is responding to proximity. And then Matthew's eyes find me across the hall, and every rational thought I have constructed over 6 months of disciplined practicality goes completely silent. He looks at me the way people look at things they thought they'd lost. The specific expression of that, the held breath, the slight forward lean of a body that hasn't yet given the command to move but is already moving, is something I will remember for the rest of my life. Then Arch's gaze tracks to wherever Matthew is looking, and Sigmund's follows. And there are 3 pairs of eyes on me from across a crowded hall, and the room is still full of 200 people, and none of them exist at this moment in any way that registers. Petra's hand grips mine so hard it almost hurts. Saren, she breathes, very quietly. Why are all 3 of them looking at you? I can't answer. The headmaster is already moving toward the Calloways to welcome them, already extending his hand, already starting the sequence of formal greetings that these events require. He doesn't notice that all 3 of the men he's approaching are looking somewhere past him. Arch turns first. He takes the headmaster's hand. He says something that makes the headmaster laugh. His face is perfectly composed. But I see in the fraction of a second, before the composure settles the expression beneath it, something stripped raw. Something that has been waiting. Matthew is the last to look away from me. He does it like it costs him something. The endowment presentation lasts 45 minutes. I don't hear any of it. I stand in the back with Petra's hand in mine, and I breathe through the warmth in my chest that has become, over the course of the ceremony, something almost unbearable in its intensity. Like standing next to a fire after months in the cold, the relief of it and the pain of it existing simultaneously in a way that makes it impossible to know which is which. Across the hall, Arch stands at the podium and speaks about the future of education in terms that are precise and persuasive and completely lost on me. Matthew stands beside him with the rigid posture of a man exercising enormous restraint. Sigmund stands on Arch's other side and twice during the 45 minutes turns his head and looks directly at me. Not a glance, a look. The kind of look that means he's been thinking about what he's seeing for long enough that looking at it is a continuation rather than a beginning. After the presentation, there is a reception. People circulate. The headmaster introduces the Calloways to board members and department heads. Wine is poured. Canapes are passed. I try to move toward the exit. Saren, Petra catches my elbow. If you leave now, it'll be obvious. I'm pregnant and tired. That's obvious regardless. You know that's not what I mean. I do know. I stop moving toward the exit. I stay near the east wall with my back against the paneling and Petra at my shoulder, and I wait for the reception to be over, and I do not look at the far end of the hall where 3 men are standing with champagne glasses they haven't drunk from. I'm very nearly successful. And then Isolde Reese materializes beside me. I don't know when she appeared. I don't know if she was watching for an opportunity or if this is coincidence. It doesn't matter. They're impressive, aren't they? She's looking at the far end of the hall, not at me, and her voice has the smooth, social quality she puts on for events like this pleasant surface, knives underneath. The Calloways. I've met Arch before, at a finance summit in the city. Extraordinary man. Completely cold, but extraordinary. She pauses. My family is speaking with them about a collaborative endowment, significant funding, multi-year. Another pause. It's funny, they came all this way personally, one has to wonder why. I say nothing. I imagine it wasn't to see the scholarship cohort. She finally looks at me, and the pleasantness drops out of her voice like a stone. Saren, I've been thinking about what would be best for the scholarship program going forward. There's an argument to be made that the review criteria should be adjusted. Productivity metrics, contribution to academy standing. Her eyes drop briefly to my stomach. It becomes difficult to justify a scholarship renewal when the student's primary contribution to the community is as a source of ongoing social disruption. My jaw tightens. The committee meets in 3 weeks, she says. Just something to think about. She turns to leave. She doesn't make it 2 steps. A voice comes from her left, measured and very quiet, carrying the particular quality of absolute certainty, the voice of someone who has never once in his life needed to raise it to be heard. Say that again. Isolde stops. I look up. Arch Calloway is standing 4 feet away, his champagne glass held loosely at his side, his gray eyes on Isolde with an expression of the specific, focused coldness that I remember from 6 months ago, not anger, something more controlled than anger, something that knows it doesn't need to be angry to be dangerous. Behind him, Matthew stands with his hands at his sides and his jaw set. And Sigmund stands to Arch's right, and he is looking at me. Not at Isolde, not at the social situation unfolding, at me. At my face, at my hands, at the way I'm holding myself against the wall, and then gently, deliberately, unmistakably at the visible swell of my stomach beneath my jacket. His expression does something I cannot name, something that breaks open and then closes again very quickly, like a window blown open by wind and then shut before the rain comes in. Isolde has recovered. She's very good at recovering. I'm sorry, she says, pleasant and cool. I don't believe we've been introduced. We haven't, Arch says, which means you don't know that I have an excellent memory for conversations I overhear. Say it again. Isolde's pleasant expression flickers, just once. I was simply speaking with you were telling a pregnant student that his scholarship renewal was contingent on his ability to cause less social disruption. Arch's voice doesn't change in volume or temperature, which is both factually incorrect, since scholarship review criteria are set by the academic board and not by advisory panels, and also deeply unpleasant. I was merely, "What is your family's endowment?" Arch asks. Isolde blinks. Excuse me? The Reese family endowment. The amount your family contributes annually to Ashford's operating budget. I'd like the number. A beat of silence. I don't see how that's... Because, Arch says, very quietly, I'm about to sign a commitment that is 6 times that number. And I'm trying to decide whether Ashford is the kind of institution that allows advisory panel members to threaten scholarship students in reception halls, or whether it isn't. He tilts his head slightly. I'd prefer it to be the latter, but I want to understand the current situation first. The color drains out of Isolde's face so completely and so quickly that it is almost interesting from a clinical perspective. Matthew says nothing. He doesn't need to. He simply exists in the space to Arch's left, and that is sufficient. I think, Arch continues, that you might want to find somewhere else to be for the rest of this reception. He pauses. And I think the scholarship committee would benefit from reviewing its advisory membership. I'll be speaking to the headmaster about it this evening. Isolde leaves. Not quickly, that would give too much away. But she leaves, and she doesn't look at me as she goes, which is the only mercy she's shown me in 6 months, and I am certain she doesn't mean it as mercy. The 3 of them are standing in front of me. I press my back into the wall. Arch's gaze moves from the direction Isolde went to me, and the controlled coldness shifts not entirely, not dramatically, but something underneath it surfaces, something that is not cold at all. Matthew takes a half step forward and stops himself, his hands at his sides. Sigmund is still looking at my face, carefully, quietly. Are you all right? He asks. It's such a simple question. It is such an ordinary question. It is the question I have not been asked by anyone with any real intention of hearing the answer in approximately 6 months, and Sigmund asks it like the answer matters not as social courtesy, not as preamble to something else, but as if he has been wondering for a long time and has been waiting for the opportunity to ask. Something in me cracks. Not dramatically, not visibly, just a hairline fracture, the kind that runs through a wall and is invisible until the light hits it at the right angle. I'm fine, I say. My voice is very steady. The steadiness costs me something. Sigmund looks at me for a moment longer. Then, very gently, "You don't have to say that." My throat closes. Petra, who has been standing beside me through all of this in the particular silence of a person who understands that witnessing something is a form of support, takes my hand. And I look at the three men in front of me, these men whose scent I have carried in my chest for 6 months, whose bond I have been pretending not to feel, whose children are making themselves known with a series of increasingly pointed flutters against my ribs, and I think, very clearly, I am not ready for this. And also, underneath that, with a directness that has nowhere to hide, I have been waiting for this. Both things are true simultaneously. I have no idea what to do with that. "There's a room," Arch says, and his voice is very careful in a way that tells me he's choosing each word with more precision than he usually needs to apply. "Off the main corridor. Private. The headmaster will have given us access for the evening." He pauses. "We could talk." I look at him. "Just talk," Sigmund adds. "Not reassurance, information." Matthew says nothing. He's looking at me like he's afraid that if he speaks, it will break something. I think of the outline I made, the practicality, the 6 months of keeping my head down and managing and surviving. I think of Petra beside me, and the midwife on site, and the 3 small lives that are currently objecting loudly to my elevated heart rate. I look at the 3 of them. "Okay," I say. "The room Arch mentioned is a study off the main corridor, dark wood, bookshelves, a long table that the headmaster has had cleared of its usual paperwork, 2 reading lamps, a window looking onto the south garden where the jasmine grows in winter, apparently unbothered by the cold." I sit in the chair nearest the door. Not because I plan to run, because it's the chair that gives me the most awareness of the space, a habit I developed in the first month of pregnancy when every room started feeling either too small or too exposed. I need to be able to see the exits. It helps me breathe. Petra comes with me. Nobody objects. I didn't ask permission. Arch takes the chair across the table. He sits with his hands flat on the surface, which I am reading, perhaps incorrectly, as a deliberate choice not to make any sudden gestures. Matthew stays standing. He positions himself near the window, and if I didn't know better, I would say he's trying to give me space. He is facing the garden, not looking at me, jaw tight. Sigmund sits on the edge of the table to my right, which is close enough to feel his presence but far enough not to impose. He does it so naturally that I don't realize it was deliberate until later. Nobody speaks first. This goes on long enough that Petra, who has the specific courage of someone who has decided that social awkwardness is preferable to prolonged silence, says, "So, you all know each other?" "We met once," I say, briefly. "At the winter formal," Sigmund says. Matthew makes a sound near the window that isn't quite a word. "6 months ago," Arch says. "Yes," I say. Another silence. "We looked for you," Sigmund says. Not accusatory, just stating it. The way you state a fact that matters. "I know." I look at my hands on the table. I saw the security inquiry. "The formal's guest registry was pulled 3 times in January. I recognize the name Calloway, and I stop." "You didn't reach out," Arch says. "No." "Why?" Matthew's voice comes from near the window, low, controlled in the way that suggests the control is effortful. "Because I didn't know what you wanted," I say. "I woke up alone. The room was empty. And then I found out I was pregnant, and I choose my next words carefully. I thought the most likely scenario was that you had looked at the situation and decided that clarity was more convenient than contact." Matthew turns from the window. "That's what you thought. That's what made the most sense." "It was 6 in the morning, Matthew says. "We had a flight. A military contractor situation that Arch had been managing for 3 months, and that required all 3 of us present within 4 hours or we lost the contract." He says it without any quality of excuse in his voice. Just information. Information he's been holding for 6 months and apparently needing to say, "I went back to the room before we left. I went back and the bed was empty." I look up. "I thought," he stops. Something moves across his face. "I thought you'd left because you didn't want to be found." "I left because I thought you didn't want to find me." The silence after that is the kind that has weight and temperature. It sits in the room like something solid. Sigmund closes his eyes briefly. He has the expression of someone doing the mathematics of 6 lost months and arriving at a number that hurts. The bond, I say, and the word costs me something. It's the first time I've said it out loud to anyone who might understand what it means. The pack bond. From that night, I look at Arch, because Arch is the one I can say this to without my voice doing something I don't want it to do. You felt it. Yes, Arch says. All three of you. Yes. For 6 months. Yes. His voice is even, careful, a directional pull, increasingly strong over time, which was inconsistent with what we understood about bonds that hadn't been confirmed. He pauses. Sigmund theorized that the intensification might have a specific cause. I look at Sigmund. Sigmund looks back at me with that soft, careful expression. Pack bond formation with an omega carrying a pregnancy strengthens the signal, he says, very quietly. The bond anchors to the children as well as to the omega. More anchors means stronger pull. I press my hands flat on the table. How many? Arch asks. The question is very quiet. It is so quiet that it barely exists as a sound. I look at him. The pregnancy, he says. How many? This is the moment. I have been carrying this moment for 3 months since the midwife told me. Since I sat in the infirmary with my hands shaking and tried to understand what triplet meant in this context. Since I have been lying in my narrow bed at night doing the mathematics that Sigmund is probably also doing right now. 3, I say. The room goes completely still. Not the silence of 200 people in a hall, the silence of 3 people simultaneously absorbing something that rearranges the architecture of everything they thought they understood. Matthew sits down. He does it without looking for a chair. He just sits directly onto the floor, back against the wall below the window, one knee up and his arm resting on it, as if the floor was the only option. Sigmund's hand, which has been resting on the edge of the table, closes into a fist on the wood. Once, then releases. Arch doesn't move. He looks at me and I can see the moment the understanding arrives, the eyes going fractionally wider, then the visible effort of composure reasserting itself, and then beneath the composure, raw and unhidden, something that looks like a man who has just understood what he almost lost. 1 each, I say. I need to say it fully. I need to get through this, the midwife explained the biology. Pack bond formation with multiple alphas produces in rare cases, in strong bond formations, 1 child per bonded alpha. It's a marker of the bond's completion, of its legitimacy. My voice is very steady. I am very proud of how steady it is. She said she's only read about it in case studies. Saren, Sigmund's voice is very quiet. I'm not finished, I say. He goes quiet. I want to say something before anyone says anything else. I look at all 3 of them, Arch at the table, Sigmund at the table's edge, Matthew on the floor. I have been doing this alone for 6 months. I have managed my own medical care and my own finances and my own scholarship standing. I have survived Isolde Reese and the Academy's social machinery and the specific experience of being publicly pregnant and unmated in an environment that treats that as either evidence of stupidity or evidence of immorality. My voice tries to waver on the last sentence, and I hold it. I am not saying this to make you feel guilty. I am saying it because I need you to understand that I am not a person who needs to be rescued. I am a person who might, possibly, choose to accept help. Those are very different things. Another silence. Then Matthew from the floor says, okay. Just that. Okay. Sigmund says, what do you need? And Arch says nothing, but he reaches across the table and sets his hand, palm up, in the space between us. Not taking, offering. I look at his hand for a long moment. I think about 6 months of surviving. I think about the way the pull in my chest has been getting louder for weeks and how it has, in the past 2 hours, gone from background noise to something that feels almost like breathing. I think about the 3 small lives in me who have been responding to proximity since the moment these 3 men walked into the same building. I place my hand on top of Arch's. His fingers close around mine, carefully, like holding something that could break, but with the specific gentleness of someone who intends to be careful enough that it doesn't. Sigmund exhales a long, controlled breath that suggests he has been holding it for some time. Matthew, from the floor, puts his face in his hands. Not weeping, just covering. A man who has spent 6 months being angry at the wrong target finally putting down the weight. I'm still angry, I say, at the situation, at how this happened. I'm not. I want to be clear that this isn't immediate forgiveness for 6 months of absence. We're not asking for forgiveness, Arch says. Not yet. What are you asking for? He looks at me. His hand is still around mine. To be present, he says. For whatever amount of presence you're willing to allow. I consider this. Thursdays, I say. Midwife appointments are Thursdays. You can be there if you want. Something shifts in Arch's expression. Fractional, controlled, but real. We want, Sigmund says quietly. All of us, Matthew says from the floor. He has lifted his face out of his hands. He looks tired and relieved, and like a person who has been running towards something for 6 months and has just, finally, stopped running. I look at them. The three of them together, in this small, private room with the jasmine outside the window. The three scents from that night, fully present and close, and the warmth in my chest that has stopped being an ache and started being something else entirely. Something like home. Thursdays, I say again, firmly. And nothing without my permission. Nothing that involves the scholarship committee or Isolde Reese or the academy administration without telling me first. You act on my behalf only when I have asked you to. My life is mine. I've been running it alone for long enough to know that it works. Agreed, Arch says. Agreed, Sigmund says. Yeah, Matthew says. And then, with the specific quiet of someone who means it more than the word conveys, whatever you need, just tell us what you need. I squeeze Arch's hand once. He squeezes back. Outside the window, the winter jasmine is blooming despite the cold, the way it always does, stubborn and fragrant and completely unbothered by the fact that the conditions are wrong for it. I know how that feels. Petra is waiting in the corridor when I come out. She takes one look at my face, which I imagine is doing several things at once, and says, very simply, good or bad? Complicated, I say. How complicated? Very. I start walking, and she falls into step beside me. The good kind of complicated, I think. Maybe. I'm not sure yet. She links her arm through mine. Do you want to tell me about it? Not tonight. I lean on her slightly. My feet hurt. My back hurts. The warmth in my chest is still there, quieter now, settled. Tonight, I want to go home and eat something and sleep. That sounds achievable. Thursdays are about to get more interesting. She glances at me sideways. Should I be worried? No. I think about this. Possibly. No. I press my hand to my stomach briefly, feeling the flutter of 3 quieter now too, almost sleepy. Ask me again in a few weeks. Behind us, in the private study, I know the 3 of them are still sitting in the same room. I know this the way you know where the sun is without looking at it, a warmth and a direction, present and undeniable. For the first time in 6 months, I walk out of Ashford's East Wing without checking over my shoulder. Thursday arrives the way important things do, quietly, without announcement, looking exactly like every other day, until you're already inside it. I am sitting in the midwife's examination room on the 2nd floor of the Academy Medical Wing when I hear them in the corridor. Not voices, the sound comes before the voices do. Footsteps, 3 sets. With a particular quality of people who are trying to move quietly and are not entirely succeeding because one of them has the natural footfall of someone who has never once had to apologize for the space he takes up. Dr. Nara, my midwife, a precise, calm beta woman who has seen everything and is unfazed by most of it, glances toward the door. Expecting company? She asks. Possibly, I say. She gives me the look of someone who has 3 months of context about my situation and is assembling this new information into it with professional efficiency. Should I give you a moment? No. They can come in or they can wait. Either is fine. A knock, 3 in succession, even and measured. Arch's knock, I'll learn later. Matthew's knock is 2, loud. Sigmund doesn't knock, he says softly through the door. Saren, it's us. We're here when you're ready. Come in, I say. They come in. The examination room is not large. 3 tall men in it make it smaller, but not in an unpleasant way, in the way a room feels full when it has the right things in it. Arch positions himself near the wall immediately, which I am reading, after 3 days of thinking about Thursday, as deliberate. He gives space when space is what's needed. Matthew stands closer. Closer than Arch, less close than he wants to. I can see the wanting in the set of his shoulders, the slight forward lean he's keeping himself back from. His eyes go immediately to my stomach, and then immediately back to my face, like he's reminding himself of the correct order of things. Sigmund looks at the monitor first, reading the data with the focused attention of someone who prepared for this, which I will also learn later is accurate. He spent Tuesday evening reading medical literature about triplet omega pregnancies. He didn't mention this. I found out from Petra, who found out from a source she refuses to name. All three are healthy, Dr. Nara says, with the pleasant directness of a person who has decided the best approach to an unusual situation is to treat it as routine. Heartbeat strong, positioning normal for this stage. Baby A is already head down, which is ambitious, but not unprecedented. She looks at the three of them. I'm going to assume you have questions. Several, Arch says. I expected that. She pulls up the scan results. Let's start with what you're looking at. What follows is the most precise 40 minutes of my recent life, Doctor. Nara explains the triplet pregnancy with the methodical clarity of someone who has given this presentation before and has since refined it for maximum comprehensibility. She explains the biological markers, the way the children's scent signatures are already differentiating, the way each one corresponds to a distinct alpha lineage. Matthew goes very still when she explains the scent markers. Arch asks 12 questions, each one more specific than the last, and Dr. Nara answers all of them, with the precise satisfaction of someone who appreciates precision in return. Sigmund doesn't ask questions during the explanation. He waits until Dr. Nara has finished, until she excuses herself to give us privacy, and then he turns to me. How are you? He says. Not a question the way people usually mean it. A genuine inquiry into the current state of the thing. Tired, I say honestly. Specifically? Specifically. I look at the ceiling. The blood pressure is under control, but it fluctuates when I'm stressed. The lower back pain is constant now, which the midwife says is normal at this stage. I've been sleeping about 4 hours at a time and then waking up because one or all of them decides that my ribs are an interesting place to practice their motor development. You've been going to lectures, Arch says. Yes. Standing through them. Dr. Marsh asked me to sit. And? Sitting in the back makes me feel like I'm hiding. Arch absorbs this. What if you sat in the front? I look at him. Front of the room, not hiding, present, visible, and also sitting down. He says it without any quality of triumph, just an alternative. A solution offered without the expectation of gratitude. It's a very specific type of useful that I haven't experienced much from other people. Most people offer comfort. Arch offers solutions, and wraps them so lightly that they don't feel like instructions. I'll think about it, I say. Matthew, who has been sitting in the chair closest to the examination table, he asked permission before moving it, which surprised me enough that I agreed before I'd processed it, says, Can I ask you something? Yes. When you found out about the pregnancy, what did you do? I consider how much of this to give him. Then I decide that we are past the point of strategic self-protection in this particular room. I sat on the bathroom floor for 40 minutes, I say. Then I got up and made a list. Things to research, things to arrange, things to tell, and things not to tell. I made the list on the back of a convenience store receipt because it was the only paper I had. I look at my hands. The list was 2 pages, front and back. Matthew's throat moves. The scholarship coordinator was the first person I told. I continue. She cried, which I didn't expect. Then she helped me navigate the medical documentation. The midwife was the second. Everyone else found out because it became visible. Isolde, Sigmund says quietly. She was the one who made it public. She didn't announce it, she just made sure the right rumors reached the right people at the right time. She's very good at the architecture of social damage. She's not doing it anymore, Arch says. What did you do? I ask. I spoke to the headmaster Thursday evening. The advisory panel is being restructured. Her family's influence over the scholarship committee has been formally severed. He pauses. Quietly, without public drama, which I thought you'd prefer. He's right. I would have preferred it. I would have preferred to know first, but I would have preferred the quiet. You said you would tell me, I say, before acting. I said I would tell you, before acting on your behalf. Arch says, reorganizing the advisory panel is an action on behalf of the scholarship program's structural integrity, not specifically on behalf of you. I look at him for a long moment. He looks back without flinching. That is technically correct, I say. I'm aware. It's also the kind of technically correct that suggests you thought about it carefully enough to find the distinction. Yes. Don't do it again without telling me. A pause. Agreed. Matthew makes a sound that might, in different circumstances, be a laugh. Something funny? I ask. No, he says, but he's looking at Arch with an expression that suggests he finds something about his brother's current situation mildly satisfying, which I will understand better later when I learn that Arch is not a person who agrees to things easily or often. I want to understand something, I say, to all three of them. The question has been in my chest since Thursday evening, and I have been deciding whether to ask it. I've decided. That night. The formal. You knew what was happening. Yes, Sigmund says. All three of you. Yes. Then you understood what a simultaneous pack bond formation meant. You understood it wasn't ordinary. It was the least ordinary thing that's ever happened to any of us, Matthew says. No humor in it. Just plain fact. So why did you leave? It lands in the room the way I intended it to, not as an accusation, but as a real question. The kind that deserves a real answer. Arch speaks first. We didn't have a choice about the flight. That part is true. The situation was time-sensitive, and the consequences of missing it were significant. He looks at me steadily. But there were 11 hours between the formal ending and the flight leaving. I could have, something moves across his face. I made a calculation. I told myself that staying would create complications, and that a bond as strong as what we'd felt could withstand a brief separation while we arranged a proper approach. He stops. I was wrong. The calculation was wrong. You were scared, I say. He doesn't answer immediately. You were scared of what it meant. I continue. 3 people, simultaneous. A scholarship student you'd never met, the night before a contractual obligation. It was easier to calculate than to feel it. Arch is quiet for a moment. Then, yes. Okay, I say. He looks at me. Okay? I understand fear, I say. I've been afraid every day for 6 months. I'm not going to tell you fear isn't a valid reason for things. I'm telling you that it cost us both something, and I need you to know that I know what it cost. I look at all 3 of them. I also need you to know that I'm not going to keep paying for it indefinitely. If you're here, you're here. If you're not ready to be here in the way that this situation requires, then I need to know that now so I can continue to manage alone. We're here, Matthew says. He says it with the quality of a vow. The specific weight of someone who does not say things he doesn't mean. I've been here since the moment I found out. I was here the moment I walked into that building and smelled. He stops. Swallows. We're here. Sigmund reaches out. He touches the back of my hand very lightly, the briefest contact, and then withdraws. We're not going to let you manage alone again, he says. Not because you can't, you clearly can, but because you shouldn't have to, and because... He pauses. A rare pause for him. I'll learn. Sigmund is generally precise with language, because being present for what comes next is the only thing I've wanted for 6 months, and I don't intend to waste the opportunity. The examination room is very quiet. Outside the window, the academy courtyard is visible: the fountain, the old stone, the jasmine that blooms in winter. I think about the 40-minute bathroom floor. I think about the receipt with the 2-page list. I think about the infirmary waiting room and Petra with her sandwich, and Dr. Marsh who cried, and the 4 hours of sleep at a time, and the specific loneliness of being surrounded by 200 people and having no one to call. I think about what it would have felt like to have 3 people in a room who are looking at me like I matter 6 months ago, 5 months ago, any time before today. And then I decide that spending energy on what could have been is the least useful thing I can do with the energy I have. Thursdays, I say, and I'll think about the other days. Sigmund's expression does the thing it does, the opening up, the warmth behind the careful professional surface. Take your time. I intend to, I say. October becomes November. The academy shifts into the cold quiet of pre-examination season. The corridors less chaotic, the common rooms full of students with their heads bent over books and their coffee cups permanent fixtures in their hands. The jasmine in the courtyard finishes its winter bloom. The fountain is drained for the season. The light turns gray and horizontal and comes through the tall windows at angles that make everything look like it's happening inside a photograph. My stomach is very large. The midwife says this is because I am carrying 3, that the size I am at 8 months would be alarming in a single pregnancy, but is entirely expected in mine. She says it with the particular pride of someone who has been managing a rare case and watched it progress well. I say thank you, and try not to think about the fact that I can no longer see my feet. The triplets are in the building. This is the phrase that runs through the academy now, like weather not said dramatically, not announced, just known. The Calloway brothers have maintained a presence at Ashford since the endowment ceremony. Not resident, they have their offices in the city, their company to run, their lives that existed before Thursday and continue after it, but present. Consistently, specifically, deliberately present. Arch has a meeting with the headmaster every Monday morning at 9. I don't ask what they discuss. He doesn't tell me, which I find both frustrating and oddly respectful he is, following the letter of our agreement, that he will tell me before acting on my behalf. By the mechanism of not telling me anything about the broader institutional chess he is apparently playing, I know because the scholarship committee has been quietly, thoroughly reformed. I know because 2 of the faculty members who watched Isolde's treatment of me in silence have been moved to administrative roles with significantly reduced student contact. I know because these things happened and did not require my involvement. I decide eventually that this is Arch's specific love language, and I file it accordingly. Matthew comes to the academy on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On Tuesdays, he waits outside my advanced literature seminar in the corridor. Not inside, I asked him not to, the first week, because having him in the room made every student immediately focus on everything except the seminar, which is not useful. He said okay, and moved to the corridor, where he stands with his back against the wall and his arms crossed, and his presence radiates through the door strongly enough that the seminar has been notably quieter and more focused since he started. My lecturer, a beta woman named Professor Aiken, who has been teaching here for 20 years and has seen most things, asked me after the 3rd Tuesday whether the large man outside was a security detail. I said no. She said good. Security details are distracting. He's much better as a deterrent. On Thursdays, he comes to the midwife appointments with Arch and Sigmund. He has started asking Dr. Nara specific questions about the birth, not anxious questions, practical ones. What does she need in the room? What's the protocol if complications arise? Where do they need to be, and what do they need to do? He takes notes on his phone, which I find so unexpectedly touching that I have to look at the ceiling for 30 seconds to prevent myself from saying something about it. Sigmund leaves notes. This started in the 3rd week, and I have not asked him to stop. They are not declarations. They are observations. The first one appeared on my desk in the library. I don't know how he knew I would be there. I suspect it was Petra, and I suspect Petra has no regrets, folded into a precise square. You looked cold this morning when you came out of the East Wing. I left a blanket in your usual library chair. You don't have to keep it. I kept it. The second note, the new cafeteria menu has the vanilla custard pastry you mentioned once in passing. I told the kitchen to keep it available on Wednesdays. If you didn't mention it, hoping someone would arrange this, I apologize for the assumption. I had mentioned it once, to Petra, in passing. I have no idea when Sigmund heard it. I have stopped trying to understand how Sigmund processes information and simply accept that he does it comprehensively and with intent. The third note, Arch told me what you said about sitting in the front of lectures. He's been thinking about it since Thursday. So have I. We think you're right, that hiding isn't the answer. We also think visibility without support isn't particularly comfortable. If it would help to have someone sit with you, not me, if that's too much, we could ask Petra. Petra now sits with me in lectures. She told me she received a very polite and extremely thorough email from a Sigmund Calloway asking if she would be willing to sit with me in lectures and providing a concise and accurate summary of why this would be medically and socially beneficial. She said she replied that she had been sitting with me in lectures for 2 months already. He replied, I know. I was asking if you'd be willing to continue. She said yes. What I am learning in these weeks is that the three of them are not interchangeable. They are not the same person in three bodies. They are three distinct architectures of care, each one built differently, each one expressing the same thing in a completely different language. Arch expresses it through systems. He fixes the underlying structures that make my life harder. He doesn't ask permission because he's learned that I will say no to things that are for my comfort and yes to things that are for my safety, so he categorizes carefully and acts accordingly. He is infuriating and effective in equal measure, and I have started sitting in the front row of lectures. Matthew expresses it through proximity. He cannot not be near things he considers his to protect it, is biological and primal, and he is aware of it and managing it with a degree of restraint that I am told by Sigmund is unprecedented in Matthew's recorded history. He doesn't touch me without invitation. He offers invitation through presence, the specific quality of a person who is saying times, I am here, I am available, I am not going anywhere times through the simple mechanism of not going anywhere. One evening, leaving the library late, I find him in the corridor outside. It's 11 at night. The academy is quiet. He is sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, his phone in his hand, apparently working. You didn't have to wait, I say. I know, he says. It's 11 o'clock. I'm aware. I look at him for a moment. He looks back, and in his face is the expression I am learning to read, the one that says he knows exactly what he's doing and why, and has made the decision fully conscious of how it might appear and done it anyway. Walk me home, I say. He gets up immediately. We walk the 20 minutes to my off-campus room in the particular quiet of two people who are still learning the sound of each other's silences. His hand, twice, moves toward mine and stops. The third time I reach out and take it, and he exhales, barely audible, very real, and doesn't say anything. We walk the rest of the way like that. Isolde makes her final move on a Tuesday in November. I find out about it the way I find out about most things now through Petra, who heard it from two separate sources, who confirms it by pulling up the Academy's internal messaging system. Someone has uploaded my full medical file to the student social platform, not the summary, the file. 7 months of records, including the triplet diagnosis, the blood pressure concerns, the biological notation about the pack bond markers and the children's scent signatures. Not anonymous. The upload is traced, within 4 hours, to a private device registered to Isolde Reese. I read the notification sitting in the front row of my advanced literature seminar, which has not yet started, and I feel the specific coldness that settles over me in the moments when I have moved past the capacity for normal emotional response into something quieter and more final. My phone, a moment later, a message from Arch, 3 words, "We know, handled." Then from Sigmund. The file has been removed from the platform. Platform administrators are cooperating. No further copies are accessible. Then from Matthew, which arrives while I'm reading Sigmund's, a photo of himself in the corridor outside the seminar room with the specific expression of someone who is not going anywhere. I put my phone in my bag. Professor Aiken starts the seminar. I take notes. After class, in the corridor, I find not just Matthew, but all 3 of them. I look at Arch. Tell me what happened. The file was uploaded at 7 this morning, he says. Sigmund's security team flagged it at 7:14. It was removed by 7:40. The window of public access was 26 minutes. He pauses. We estimate between 40 and 60 students saw the original content. And Isolde is currently in a meeting with the headmaster and the Academy's legal counsel. Arch's voice is even. She will be formally expelled by this afternoon. The Reese family endowment has been formally declined by the board. I made the recommendation at 9 o'clock this morning. I absorb this. You told me, I say. We told you, he agrees. This one is specifically on your behalf. You had the right to know before it happened. I called you at 7:15. You didn't answer. I was in the shower. I know. I sent the message anyway, so you'd have the timestamp. I look at the message log on my phone. 7:15. The timestamp is there. I look up at him. Something in my chest that has been wound tight for 3 months loosens by 1 degree. Thank you, I say. He doesn't say you're welcome. He says, we should have done this months ago. You didn't know months ago. No, he says. But someone should have. The system should have. His jaw tightens slightly. It won't happen again. Matthew puts a hand on my shoulder gently, careful, asking with the pressure of it whether this is okay. I lean into it slightly by way of answer and his hand settles, warm and steady. Go home, Sigmund says. Not the campus room, actually home, whatever that means to you. Rest. The examination period doesn't start for 2 weeks. You have time. He looks at me with the particular directness he uses when he's saying something important. You did nothing wrong today. Nothing that happened today was your fault. I want you to hear that clearly before you spend the evening thinking about it. I hear it. I'm not sure I believe it entirely, but I hear it. Thursday, I say. Thursday, all three of them say, almost simultaneously, in the particular way that identical people occasionally do things not planned, just synchronized. An expression of the same underlying rhythm. I go home. I sit in my chair by the window and put my hands on my stomach and feel the three of them moving restless, responsive, aware of my mood in that inexplicable biological way. They have, and I say quietly to the room, it's almost over. The hard part is almost over. A flutter, 3 beats, optimistic, or so I choose to read it. Yeah, I say, me too. The labor begins at 4 in the morning on a Wednesday, 12 days before my due date. It begins the way things do in the body when the body has decided not with drama, but with certainty. A pressure, then another, rhythmic and deliberate. I have been told what to expect, and my body is delivering exactly what I was told to expect, which is almost funny, in a distant way, from inside the experience. I sit up in bed. I breathe through the first contraction. I pick up my phone and call Dr. Nara. It's time, I say. How far apart? 6 minutes. I'll meet you at the medical wing. Don't walk quickly. Don't carry anything heavy. Do you have someone to come with you? I pause. I'll call someone, I say. I hang up. I look at my phone. I open the message thread. There are 3 names at the top. I have a group thread with all 3 of them. Sigmund created it in week 2, labeled it simply Times Thursday Times with no further explanation, and it has since become something I use more than I intended to when I accepted the invitation. I type, it's happening, medical wing. I send it before I can think about it too carefully. I stand up. I go to the bathroom. I splash cold water on my face and look at my reflection for a moment. 8.5 months of pregnancy, 4 hours of sleep, and the specific expression of someone who is standing at the edge of something enormous and choosing to step forward. I step forward. My phone vibrates as I'm putting on my coat. 3 replies, sent within 40 seconds of each other. Arch, we're coming. Don't go through the courtyard. Use the east corridor. It's shorter and sheltered from the wind. Matthew, on our way. Don't carry the bag. Leave it. We'll bring it. Sigmund, breathe. We're there in 12 minutes. You're doing perfectly. I read them all. I leave the bag. I take the east corridor. They are there in 11 minutes. I see them coming through the corridor before they see me. 3 men who have, at 4 in the morning, clearly gotten dressed while already moving. Because Arch's coat is slightly crooked and Matthew has his shirt only half tucked and Sigmund is still buttoning his cuff with one hand while he walks. And then they see me and the urgency shifts, not slowing down, but focusing. The quality of motion changing from rushing toward to arriving at. Matthew gets to me first. Hey, he says. His voice is very quiet. His hand goes to my arm, steady. Hey, I've got you. I can walk, I say. I know you can walk, he says. I'm just here. Sigmund appears at my other side. How far apart now? 4 minutes, I say. They sped up. Okay, he looks at Arch. Something passes between them, the specific communication of people who know each other completely. Arch nods once. Dr. Nara's ahead, Arch says. She's ready. Let's go. We walk the remaining corridor together. My hand, without my fully deciding it, finds Matthew's. His fingers close around mine immediately. At my other side, Sigmund's hand comes to the small of my back, supporting, not pushing. Arch walks slightly ahead, clearing the path, I'll realize later, making sure every door is open, every obstacle is out of the way, every person who might slow us down has already moved aside. The logistics of arrival, managed before we arrive. The medical wing is warm and bright. Dr. Nara meets us at the door. Good, she says, taking one look at me, and then at the three of them. All of you. Wash your hands. Seren, with me. 11 hours. Labor with triplets is not brief. Dr. Nara told me this in month 6, and again in month 7, and again 2 weeks ago. It is not brief, and it is not linear, and there will be moments when it stops feeling manageable, and that is normal and not an indication of failure. She was accurate. There are moments when I am certain I cannot continue. There are moments when the pain moves past the capacity for measured response and into something older and more animal. There are moments when the room feels very small and very large at the same time. Through all of it, they are there. Matthew, on my left, solid and warm, his hand in mine with a grip calibrated to match however hard I need to squeeze without comment or flinching. He speaks very little. He doesn't need to. He exists in the space beside me as a steady, unbroken presence, the specific comfort of someone who will not leave, stated not through words but through the simple fact of being there every time I open my eyes. Sigmund, on my right, talking me through the intervals. Not a performance of calm, actual calm, the kind that comes from having prepared comprehensively and decided in advance that what is needed in this room is steadiness. He watches the monitors and tells me what they say. He tells me what comes next before it comes. He interprets the medical information in real time so I don't have to process it alone. Arch stands at the foot of the bed. He asked Dr. Nara where he'd be most useful, and she pointed to that spot, and he has not moved from it. He watches everything, me, the monitors, the midwife's face for information, the other two for their states. He is running the room the way he runs everything, quietly, completely, from a position where he can see all of it. He is the one who breaks. Baby A arrives first, small and dark-haired and furious about the transition from one world to another, announcing himself at considerable volume. Doctor. Nara places him on my chest, and the sound stops, not because anything is wrong, but because he has found what he was looking for, and settles. And Arch, who has stood at the foot of that bed for 11 hours with his arms at his sides and his face composed, makes a sound. It is very small, almost inaudible, the kind of sound that happens when a person's composure reaches the limit of what composure can hold. I look at him. His eyes are on the child on my chest. His jaw is tight with the effort of not falling apart. His hands, which have been still at his sides all this time, have come up, slightly reaching, not reaching, arrested in the gesture. Arch, I say. He looks at me. Come here, I say. He crosses the room in 2 steps. He stands at the side of the bed. He reaches out with a hand that is not entirely steady and touches very gently, with one finger the dark hair of the child on my chest. And then he puts his face in his other hand, and he does not make a sound, but his shoulders shake once, hard, like the release of something that has been held for too long. Matthew's hand tightens on mine. Sigmund says nothing. He puts a hand on Arch's back, once, briefly. Baby B arrives 20 minutes later with considerably less drama. He comes out already looking around, with the expression of someone who has arrived and is assessing the situation. Matthew holds his son before the midwife has finished the count and goes completely, deeply silent for exactly 10 minutes, looking at the small face in his hands with the expression of a man who has just understood what he was made for. Baby C, Sigmund's, arrives last and smallest and quietest, and when they place him in Sigmund's arms, Sigmund cries. Not quietly, genuinely, fully, without apology. He cries and looks at his son and says something too soft for me to hear, and I decide I don't need to hear it. Some things are between a father and his child. Later, much later, the room is quieter. The children are sleeping too in the bassinet beside the bed, one on my chest, the arrangement we've fallen into over the past 2 hours by the logic of who needs what rather than any plan. The midwife has done everything that needed doing and left us. The lights are low. The 3 of them are there, Arch in the chair by the window, Matthew on the floor with his back against the bed, close enough to reach. Sigmund cross-legged in the other chair with his son asleep against his chest, one hand supporting the small head. I am exhausted in a way that goes past tiredness into something that doesn't have a word. But underneath the exhaustion there is something else, something warm and enormous and very quiet. I need to say something, I say. 3 pairs of eyes turn to me. I've been angry, I say, for 6 months. At the situation, at the way this started, at the 6 months of being alone, I've managed the anger well, I think. I've been functional with it. I look at the child on my chest, but I don't want to keep carrying it past today. It's too heavy for what comes next. I look up. That's not forgiveness for its own sake. It's a practical decision. I need both hands free. Matthew makes a sound. It might be a laugh. It might be something else. The thing I need from you, I continue, in exchange for putting the anger down, is this. I look at each of them in turn. Don't waste it. Don't waste the time we lost. Be here, and be here in the way that this requires, not the way that's comfortable, not the way that's convenient, the real way. Yes, Arch says. One word, absolute. Yes, Sigmund says, looking at me with that expression, the open one, the warm one, the one that stopped pretending several weeks ago. Matthew doesn't say yes. He reaches up and takes my free hand and holds it, and that is, I've learned, how Matthew says the things that matter most. I look at the three of them in this quiet room. I think about the receipt with the 2-page list. I think about Petra and her sandwich. I think about the winter jasmine that blooms despite everything. I have something to ask you, I say. They wait. The bond, I say. The mating mark. We've been circling it. I look at my hands, one holding Matthew's, one on the child sleeping on my chest. I don't want to circle it anymore. The room becomes very still. Saren, Sigmund says, very carefully. Are you sure? I've been sure for 3 weeks, I say. I've been waiting for the right moment. I think this is the right moment. A pause. It's a medical ward, Arch says, after 11 hours of labor. I know what it is, I say. I'm still sure. Another pause. Then, from Arch, how do you want to do this? Together, I say. All three of you. The same way the bond formed together, or not at all. The quiet in the room is full. Not empty full, the way rooms are when they contain something real. Matthew shifts from the floor. He is careful of the child on my chest, careful of the bassinet, careful of the space. He sits on the edge of the bed with a delicacy that sits completely wrong on his size and looks entirely right on him. Arch comes from the chair. He stands at the head of the bed, close. Sigmund stays where he is, his son against his chest. He reaches out with his free hand. I take it. The mating bond, when it completes, is nothing like what I expected from the literature I read in month 2, desperate and thorough and slightly tearful. There is no explosion, no dramatic shift in the world's gravity. There is warmth, the warmth that has been living in my chest for 8 months, building since that night and deepening since Thursday, that warmth arriving fully, filling the last of the space that had been empty, like something coming home, like something that was always supposed to be here, finally being here. I feel them all three, distinctly. Arch's steadiness, Matthew's warmth, Sigmund's particular attentiveness, the sense of being known. 3 different notes in the same chord. My son on my chest doesn't wake. He breathes, slow and even, completely unbothered by the enormous thing happening above him. Practical, I think. Already practical. His mother's son. Hello, I say softly. To the room, to the bond, to all of it. And from 3 directions at once, 3 different voices, 3 different textures of the same thing. Hello. The Academy's graduation ceremony happens in May, when the jasmine is at its most extravagant, and the light comes through the tall windows, amber and gold, and the courtyard smells like every beginning it has ever witnessed. I have been told, by multiple people, that I am not required to attend. I attend. I walk across the stage in my graduation gown with a pace that is slightly slower than the standard because I have been on my feet since 6 this morning, and my body would like me to remember that I am 4 months postpartum and still. Recalibrating, I hold my head up. I take my diploma from the headmaster, who shakes my hand with the specific quality of a man who is aware that the last 8 months of his academy's institutional history have been substantially reshaped by the student currently in front of him. Congratulations, Mr. Voss, he says. Thank you, I say. I walk back to my seat. In the front row of the audience section, where guests are seated, there are 3 men and 3 infants in matching cream-colored outfits. The outfits were Sigmund's idea. Arch said they were impractical. Matthew said they were perfect and took the babies to the tailor himself. The infants are approximately indifferent to the question of their outfit's practicality, which I found to be the correct approach. When I take my seat and look toward the front row, Matthew starts clapping. He doesn't wait for the ceremony to reach the applause moment. He simply starts clapping, too loud, completely unbothered by the fact that the next student is still crossing the stage and every head in the vicinity turns to look at him. Arch puts a hand on his shoulder. Matthew claps louder for exactly one more second and then stops, but the expression on his face makes it clear he stopped because he chose to and not because he was stopped. Sigmund, on Matthew's other side, is looking at me with the warm, precise expression he has when he wants to say something and is deciding whether the setting is appropriate. He decides it is not and says it with his eyes instead, and I read it the way I've learned to read him. We're proud of you. I'm proud of you. This was always yours. I look at the three of them, at Arch's composed face with the thing underneath it that I know how to see now, at Matthew's undisguised pride, at Sigmund's careful warmth, and then at the three small faces looking around at the hall with the focused curiosity of infants encountering a new space for the first time. My sons, ours, named, after several lengthy conversations for the qualities I wanted them to carry, Cale, Emery, and Fen. No alphabetical order, no birth order hierarchy. Just three names that fit. Cale is currently attempting to eat the tassel of Arch's phone case. Emery is asleep against Matthew's chest, completely unbothered by the ceremony. Fen is looking at the light coming through the tall windows with the expression of someone who has decided this is the most interesting thing he has ever seen. The scholarship now bearing my name was announced last month, the Voss Scholarship for Exceptional Students, endowed jointly by Calloway Group Consolidated and the restructured Ashford Foundation Board. Dr. Marsh cried when she told me. I held it together until I got back to the apartment, which I now share with 3 alphas and 3 infants and a startling amount of coordinated furniture that Arch acquired over 3 months without comment and that I pretended not to notice arriving. Isolde Reese transferred to another institution. I have no information about her current circumstances, and I have no particular interest in acquiring any. What she did was wrong, and the consequence was appropriate, and I have spent approximately 0 of my recovery period thinking about her, which is the best possible revenge for something like that. Petra is graduating today too. She catches my eye across the aisle and gives me the specific look of someone who has been my friend through the most extraordinary 8 months of both our lives and intends to continue being my friend for the foreseeable future. Regardless of the logistical complications introduced by my current family arrangement, I give her the look back. After the ceremony, the 4 of us, 5 now, with Petra stand in the courtyard in the May light with the jasmine in full bloom and the fountain back and running, and the whole of it smelling like every ending that is also a beginning. Matthew puts his arm around me. Arch stands close, his hand finding mine without announcing itself. Sigmund is holding Fen, who has discovered the fountain and is trying to reach it with impressive determination. How does it feel? Petra asks. I consider this. Like arriving, I say. She smiles. Good answer. Around me, the academy moves through its ceremonies and its graduations, its beginnings and endings, its seasons that return regardless. The jasmine blooms. The light comes through the stone archway golden long. 3 children blink in the warmth of it, present and unhurried and entirely, completely here. I hold my diploma in one hand and Arch's hand in the other, and behind me Matthew's arm is warm around my shoulders, and beside me Sigmund is quietly telling Fen the names of things: fountain, stone, flower, light, the way he tells me things, with the specific care of someone who believes that being informed is a form of being loved. I survived Ashford Elite Academy. I survived the bullying and the loneliness and the 6 months of being alone with 3 children growing inside me and a bond I didn't know what to do with. I survived Isolde Reese and the scholarship reviews and the specific particular cruelty of a world that treats vulnerability as an invitation. I didn't just survive it. I graduated. And standing here in the May courtyard with the jasmine and the light and the fountain and 3 men and 3 children who are mine and whose I am, I realize that surviving was never the point. This was the point. Arriving